All right, story time, offshore casino edition. I don't know why, but so many people who live in the Gold Coast seem to have offshore casinos. It's clearly something to do with the area. Anyway, old mate entered into a joint venture with a foreign company to run this casino, and he did so personally. That was kind of silly because he has unlimited liability himself, and you clearly can't run these casinos in Australia anyway. Technically, it was being run overseas, but it's pretty risky to do so. Anyway, we restructured old mate into a family trust using the 328G rollover to just de-risk him a little bit. And we also set up companies in the right jurisdictions to actually run this business. And we had to manage a whole bunch of risks. So offshore companies aren't tax evasion. If you have a legitimate offshore business, having a company in that jurisdiction makes a lot of sense. And people don't really know this, but casinos are mostly run from a few jurisdictions, including Curacao, which is a Dutch colony in the Caribbean, and also from Malta, but less so these days. There are also some other islands where you don't need licenses and stuff, like Costa Rica and St. Vincent's Grenadines, that thriving financial center. Anyway, we had a bunch of risks to consider, which included the controlled foreign company rules. We had a foreign company there, but it was doing legitimate business, which I'll get to in a moment. We had to manage the tax residency of this business. We don't want it to be an Australian tax resident. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't need to be, so let's keep it out of Australia. And also we need to make sure that there's no permanent establishment in Australia. And a permanent establishment is basically enough of a physical presence of a foreign company in Australia that Australia will decide to levy tax on it. And there's a threshold for that. Anyway, long story short, we managed all of those risks. We can't get them all the way to zero. Like any tax risk, there is tax risk in undertaking any kind of business. We also managed to get the dividends from the foreign company into an Australian company and claim something called the participation exemption. The participation exemption is really important because it allows dividends from foreign companies that are paid to an Australian company, i.e. not a trust or individual, to be tax exempt in Australia. We then used the funds in this company, which was their tax-free, to loan to other companies to start businesses which would grow this person's wealth. We don't discriminate on business type. This was a legitimate business operated overseas for overseas customers. Now, that business could not operate for Australian customers, and processes were put in place to stop that happening. Anyway, moral of the story, don't run your offshore casino in your personal name. I feel like that didn't need to be said, but it does need to be said sometimes.